not anytime before that little hand reaches that. The only time they're never late is for a reservation.
I had to make a reservation for a hotel room for somebody. Yes, coming. And I didn't realize at the time it was non-cancelable. But the person canceled on me. It took me all night to get. I got it canceled finally. Yeah, I got it canceled. It wasn't easy. Hey, Steve, how you doing? Yeah. Wow. Oh, good.
Well, I started, it was done by Corey Kipper. And very, and then came Herod booklet. You made it into a real experience. Starting in 101. Remember, Michael?
Shabbos.
Better than last week.
What was last week?
Huh?
What was last week?
No, I had a procedure this week.
You did? You all right?
I think I'm better. It's a long procedure, like 3 hours.
Oh, I didn't know that.
General anesthesia in the hospital. I didn't want to bother anybody.
Oh, you got it taken care of? Thank God.
Feel better.
That's
It was a
great.
cardiac ablation.
Eesh.
So they went in on both sides, and it's still a little sore, but
I'll bet.
I'm not as short of breath.
All right. Well,
But he's here.
thank God.
They
Okay.
use a laser, and they laser some material on your heart so that it doesn't create the arterial flutter. Hey, Biff, this is a cousin. I had it last time, and it's now called, what I have now came back to the same thing, same concept, called arterial flutter.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So, Thursday night was the day school auction.
Yeah, we know that from,
So,
it stopped with the emails.
yeah. So, what that really means is that my voice is still hoarse from trying to carry on a normal conversation in a very loud environment.
Where was it?
Right here. It was fabulous, but my voice a little hoarse. So I hope you can hear me okay. We'll do the best we can. Yeah.
You'll do great.
All right. Here we go. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam berit olah. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam berit olah. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat et ha-Shabbat ledoratam
כי ששת ימים
Asa Adonai.
עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות השבת לדורותם ברית עולם וביום השביעי שבת ונפש שבת ונפש שבת ושמרו בני ישראל לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ברוך אדוני מלך העולם
Fermented during spring break. You want a microphone?
Yeah, I don't. It's like going in and out. See now, yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to use this one. Okay, thanks. So I'll just told this one's going in and out. Okay, blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay, so well, now it's working. Maybe you just need to see if I can get it. Be easier to wear it. No. Every time you touch it, it turns off. Okay, so I'll just hold this one. Okay, so if you remember from last week, we had what would in a non-leap year be a double portion last week via Kalpakude, but because this is a leap year, both on the Gregorian calendar and the I'll just use this and on the Jewish calendar, it's a leap year. So the Torah, normally we'd be into Leviticus by now, and we could leave sort of the mundane nature of building the tabernacle for the incredibly exciting material of carving up animals for sacrifices. But because it is a leap year, we're still on Pekude, the second part of Vayakel Pekude. Now, just to remind you, we had two Torah portions called Truma and then Tetzaveh, which talked all about the construction of the tabernacle. Tabernacle in Hebrew is the Mishkan. And then we had that Torah portion of Kitisa, where we talked about the golden calf. And then after Kitisa, we have Vayakel Pekude, which is a repetition of what we already learned in Truma and Tetzaveh. But as I pointed out last week, why do we have it again? And it seems to me to be because reality changed after the golden calf. And so even though the work was the same, going to build the tabernacle, the reality after what happened with the golden calf was different. And so now God is telling through Moses the Jewish people to rebuild the tabernacle to see if their head is still in it and to see where they are. And we pointed out that just like we had, we live in the same world and we do the same things and we have the same jobs and we have the same Torah and everything's the same as it was on October 6th. We now live in a different reality with all of the same stuff. And how do we look at our new reality even though it's the same world? So now that's what Vayakel Pekude is a repetition. Oh, we got a new one? All right. I thought I successfully neutralized you guys, but Thank you. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me at home. Okay. So this is really going to be what we're going to do today, part 2 of what we did last week. And all that means is I want to continue talking about Betzalel and Aholiab. So we know that Betzalel was from the tribe of Judah. We talked all about this last week, what that means. Judah was the strongest and most powerful tribe. And when the dust settled after the northern kingdom of Israel was defeated and assimilated and became the 10 lost tribes in 723 BCE, at that point we were still known as Bnei Israel, the children of Israel. But after that, the 3 tribes that were left, being Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, they all kind of merged into Judah because Judah was so much bigger, and it was at that point that we became known as the Judeans, or what we're known as today, the Jews. Right, the Jews. Okay, so that's kind of when we went from being Bnei Israel to just Judeans, and we're going to meet the first person called a Judean next weekend on Purim, because Mordechai HaYehudi, Mordechai the Jew, is the first person in the Bible referred to as a Jew, as opposed to a Hebrew or an Israelite or a member of Bnei Israel. So that's Judah, the largest, most powerful tribe. And then Oholiab is the guy who God picks to help Bezalel, and he comes from the tribe of Dan, which is one of the smaller and poorer tribes and doesn't really exist anymore because they were one of the 10 lost tribes, unless the Ethiopian Jews are from Dan, which very well may be, but we're not sure which ones of the lost tribes they're from. They're pretty much gone, and they were smaller, and they worshipped idols, and they fell apart. By the way, Dan was also something else you know about Dan besides when they went through when they left Egypt and Amalek attacked from behind, Dan was the one who were attacked. They were in the back. And the reason they were in the back was because they were carrying idols with them. And they were sort of segregated from everyone else because they couldn't give up on they had an idol named Micha, who they carried around with them. Also, Dan, the portion of Israel that they were allotted was Tel Aviv, that region, the Sharon region. And so that's why there's a hotel chain named after Dan, because the first Dan it's actually in Jaffa. First inn was in Jaffa, but then they bought one in Tel Aviv, and that's where that came from. Probably also, it's the Fetterman family. Okay. So Pekude begins Exodus chapter 38, verse 21. That's the very beginning of the portion. Chapter 38, verse 21. And when we conclude today, we finish the book of Exodus, so we'll say, very good. Okay, you're familiar with it. Okay, Norman, do you have beginning of the portion, verse 21? Okay, here we go.
These are the records of the tabernacle of the pact, which were drawn up at Moses' bidding, the work of the Levites under the direction of Ithamar, son of Aaron the priest. Now Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, had made all that the Eternal had commanded Moses. At his side was Aholiab, son of Ahishmach, of the tribe of Dan, carver and designer and embroiderer in blue, purple, and crimson yarns and in fine linen. All the gold that was used for the work and all the work of the sanctuary, the elevation of offering of gold, came to 29 talents and 730 shekels by the sanctuary weight. The silver of those of the community who were recorded came to 100 talents and 1,775 shekels by the sanctuary weight. A half shekel, a head, and a half a shekel by the sanctuary weight for each one who was entered into the records from the age of 20 years up, 603,550 men. The 100 talents of silver were for casting the sockets of the sanctuary and the sockets for a curtain, 100 sockets to the 100 talents, a talent a socket. And of the 1,775 shekels, he made hooks for the posts, overlay for their tops, and bands around them.
Okay, I mean, riveting, right? I mean, it's, it is what it is. Yeah, look, are there Kabbalistic interpretations that are fascinating? Probably. Not really a Kabbalist, so I'm not, there aren't too many in the world that really get it. So there may be some deeper spiritual meanings for every single verse. But for the most part, it's what we've already heard in Truma and Tetzaveh. Don? Yeah. Can you pass this back? Thanks.
They mentioned specific colors. Is there something unique about those colors?
Yeah, so it's a good question. There probably are some deeper meanings. I think that these were the most valuable and probably the rarest and difficult to find. But yeah, it's a really good question. You have purple, turquoise, scarlet. Let's see if Rashi says anything. The only thing I know about it is that they were more valuable. I mean, I don't know. I don't know so much anything else. Now, the one other thing I can say though is that each tribe had its own color. And when we're in the book of Numbers, at the beginning of the book of Numbers, it talks about the flags. And there the rabbis talk about how they each had their own flag and their own color and so forth. And when they made the breastplate, the stones were each different colors, representing each of the different tribes. That's how they knew which color to make your flag. It's like when Miami got a soccer team and they said pink and black. Okay, so there may be that the things that went into the Mishkan were different combinations of different tribes. I don't know. That's all I really know about it. But it's a really good question. I'll see what else I can find. But I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know much else.
What makes one color more significant? Supply and demand?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're generally certain colors you hear about in the Torah. Purple, turquoise. If you've ever been to Sfat, you see a lot of blue. And the blue is meant to symbolize, the sky and the water, as the source of creation and the life-giving force, which is equal to Torah. So, different colors do symbolize things, but I'm not sure. I'll try to see what else I can find on that.
Rabbi, if we're talking about colors, it's a good time to help me understand how our Israeli flag became blue and white.
That's same thing. It's meant to look like the talus.
Okay.
So that's where it comes from. Okay. Okay, so I want to just look at Bezalel for a little bit. The only interesting stuff we have here, besides construction and materials, are the personalities involved. Now, we said last week, if you're looking at verse 22, Bezalel is the son of Uri, son of Hor, which we said last week is weird, because we usually don't get the grandfather's name. We usually only get the father. And Hor was the son of Miriam, which means that Bezalel comes from a very important line. And he's of the tribe of Judah. So immediately we can say, and this is all repeat from last week, but, yes, Paul?
Yeah, doubling the word kudei in the first sentence. Can you elaborate on that?
What about it?
Eluf kudei.
Yeah.
Mishkan.
Microphone, please.
Mishkan.
The Mishkan.
Yeah, where it says Mishkan twice.
Yeah, HaMishkan,
Eluf
Mishkan.
kudei Mishkan, Mishkan ha'edut.
Okay. So I like this. I like this idea. This is I think this is a very, this is actually a very encouraging idea. So I was in Philadelphia a few days ago with my, for the CCAR conference, and my brother lives in Philadelphia, so I had dinner with my brother and his wife and his daughter, and her bat mitzvah's coming up. And her Torah portion is Ki Tavo. And not only is she not excited about her Torah portion, I don't know that she's even excited about her bat mitzvah. But I asked her, what's your Torah portion about? And she said, the retribution. So, the tochachot. So there are two places in the Torah. One's at the end of Leviticus in Bechukotai, and one's towards the very end of Deuteronomy in Torah portion called Ki Tavo, which talks about all the horrible things that will happen to the Jewish people if they don't follow the Torah. And it's really awful. I mean, you read all the curses are really awful. So much so that some people, when they read it in shul during, that week, they whisper it, right? You okay? All right.
He's lost.
Okay, don't worry about that. Don't worry. That's why your plout has all these pages in the middle. You never know where you are. So the question is, why do you need these? The list is so horrible. Why do you need it twice? So the first time they say is for the destruction of the first temple. The second time they say is for the destruction of the second temple. So, okay, you can read into that the temple is going to be destroyed twice. But it's not going to be destroyed 3 times. So the third temple will be forever. That's kind of the way we look at it. Now, what does Pekude say, according to Rashi? So if you look at verse 21, it says, Ele Pekude, these are the accountings, HaMishkan, Mishkan. It repeats the word Mishkan twice. And you really don't need to repeat it twice. And Rashi said the word is stated twice, which is an allusion to each of the 2 holy temples, which was taken in collateral in its 2 destructions for the sins of Israel. But meaning that we'll only get punished twice. And if you're someone who's interested in the concept of Reshit Geula, the ideas of Rav Kook, that the state of Israel are the seeds of the redemption or the beginning of the third temple period, then you don't have to worry about the Iranian nuclear program, because we're there. The third temple won't be destroyed. So you should still vote accordingly and call your senators, but we don't want to, but that means that the third temple will never be destroyed, and I take comfort in that. Okay. Now, I did prepare a few things that I wanted to get into here, notably 3 midrashim on Betzalel. So what I want to try to figure out in the next 35 minutes or so is, who is Betzalel and why was he chosen? Now, all we know last week was that he was a Chabad member, right? Right, he had Chochmah, Bina, and Da'at, right? The Torah told us last week that he had the 3 words that make up the acronym of Chabad: Chochmah, wisdom; Bina, understanding; and Da'at, knowledge. What the difference are between those 3, it's hard to say. But it was some sort of divine inspiration and knowledge and ability that he had. And even though other people were helping to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle, he was there too. And he was important. And then there's Aholiab, who also had these 3 things of Chabad: Chochmah, Bina, and Da'at. And we know that one's from a big tribe and one's from a poor tribe. That being said, there might be more to learn about who these guys were, namely Betzalel and Aholiab too. And so I brought 3 midrashim, all from Exodus Rabbah, section 41, 2, and 3, that will give us a little bit deeper understanding of who Betzalel was and who he was chosen. Which means to say it's more interesting to spend time trying to figure out what we can learn about who Betzalel was than counting sockets. Because that's not that fun. So, okay. So here we go. Edith, would you mind reading the first midrash, Rabbi Tanchuma?
Rabbi Takuma bar Abba began with Job 28:7, quoting, "Then he saw it and recorded it, prepared it, and analyzed it. God looked and saw Israel accepting the Torah. Otherwise, he would not have created the world, as it says. Then he saw it and recorded it. And he said to man, reverence for God is wisdom." Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, "What is the meaning of reverence for God is wisdom, and avoiding evil is understanding?" God declared, "If you possess good deeds, I will reward you." Rabbi Berechia cited Rabbi Chia bar Abba. The reward for reverence is Torah. For from Yocheved God brought Moshe, and he merited that Torah was recorded in his name.
Okay, so one of the things we know about Miriam, now, why would you want to have a midrash talking about Bezalel that refers to Miriam? It's his great-grandmother, right? Hor is his grandfather. Miriam's Hor's father. So, but Bezalel comes from Miriam. What do we know about Miriam? Miriam had a fear of God, or what we call Yirat Hashem. She was in awe of God. Does anyone remember where in the Torah we see that Miriam was in awe of God? I'll give you a hint. It was real early on. When she was as a midwife, and Pharaoh told the midwives to drown all the Jewish boys, and she and Yocheved, her mother, refused to do it. And they kept, and the Torah specifically says, because they feared God. The Torah actually says those words. Because they feared God, they didn't drown the Jews and so forth, and because of that, we have Jews. Right? Okay, so what we're saying here is the reward for reverence is Torah. For from Yocheved, God brought Moses, and he merited that Torah was recorded in his name. Miriam avoided evil and sin, and God brought from her Bezalel, who achieved wisdom and understanding. So the fact that Yocheved and Miriam had this reverence for God, something having to do with Torah came from them. What was it? From Yocheved came Moses, who brought the Torah, and from Miriam came Bezalel, who built the Mishkan, which is what the Torah is based on. Okay, clear so far? Yeah. So, what has Bezalel in and of himself done so far in this first midrash to earn the right to build the tabernacle? He was born. Nothing. Right. He was born. Okay. So the first thing, listen to how important this is. The first thing that the midrash is offering is that the reason Bezalel was chosen, not because of anything specific that he did, but because he inherited wisdom, understanding, and divine knowledge. He inherited it because of the deeds of his great-grandmother. Clear so far? So in other words, genetics is what he's earned so far. That's Midrash 1.
Good to be king.
Yeah, okay, that's Midrash 1. Now, so the first thing you should be saying is, yeah, that's Midrash 1, but I see you brought 2 other Midrashim. All right. Okay, so, Annabelle? I'll repeat the question. I'll repeat the question. It's okay. Okay, I don't need to repeat it.
Both Miriam and Yocheved were Levites.
Right.
So if they were Levites, how come it's being mentioned that it's from the tribe of Judah?
Because his father was from Judah. His father was from Judah, but on his mother's side, on Miriam, his mother's side, It's a good question. He comes from the Levites. And ultimately, the Levites and the Judites merged. So, except the Levites changed their last name to Levi. So, and Leibowitz, right. Exactly. And by the way, we saw this last week also with Dan and Naphtali. And the Midrash asked the question, why do you say sometimes Oholiab is from Dan and sometimes we see that he's from Naphtali? And the answer is because his mother came from one and his father came from the other. I think I brought that source last week. Very good point, though. Very good point. Okay, Midrash number 2. Who's got Annabelle, since you have the mic, would you read alternatively?
Alternatively, I have called the name of Bezalel. It does not say, rather, see, I have called. Moshe said, to whom shall I instruct? He said, I will show you. What did God do? He brought the book of Adam, see Bereshit and Bereshit Rabbah, and showed Moshe all of the generations which would arise from the beginning until the resurrection of the dead, each generation and its kings, each generation and its leaders, each generation and its prophets. He told Moshe, I established each from that initial movement, and I established Bezalel too from that moment.
Okay.
This is the meaning of, see, I have called the name of Bezalel.
Okay, so Midrash 2, what does this mean? It means that according to the Midrash's understanding of Genesis chapter 5, where it's explained in the Midrash on Genesis, that God showed to Moses the entire chain of leadership of the Jewish people, which included Bezalel. So he's, and by the way, the Torah does a lot of it for you, because if you go according to the genealogies and you look who's from Abraham directly, you get this guy begot this guy, begot this guy, begot this guy, and then you had Moses, and then you had Aaron, and then you had King David, and then you had King Solomon, and then you had all the rabbis of the Talmud, and then you had Rashi, and then you had Rambam, then you had Rabbi Baumgard, and then you had me, and then you had... I was waiting all week for that. All right. He's losing his spot quickly. All right. No politics. No politics. Okay, so when God told Moses who all the kings were going to be, who all the prophets were going to be, who all the, great rabbis were going to be, who was going to, all that, well, one of the people who was included in that list was the guy who built the tabernacle, who's Bezalel, which again, just like in Midrash number 1, we see in Midrash 2, what has Bezalel done so far that we're aware of to have garnered this role? Literally nothing. And by the way, you could say the same for everyone else in this respect. Like Moses clearly was chosen before he was born. So was Abraham, so was Isaac, so was Jacob, according to this Midrash. Now, in their lives, they did things to earn those. So, would they have been in that list had they not earned it? No. But God knew they were going to earn it. If you go back to the first Midrash, look what it says, something very interesting. In the second line of the first Midrash, God looked and saw Israel accepting the Torah. Otherwise, he would not have created the world. So God has looked ahead into the world to see what was going to happen. And he sees, okay, I see, Abraham's going to do this, this, and this, so he's going to be the first Jew. And then Isaac is going to do this, this, and this, and Ishmael isn't, so then it's going to be Isaac. And then Jacob's going to do this, this, and this, and Esau isn't, so then it's going to be Jacob. And he went and he looked and he saw who were going to be the leaders. And when he looked, he saw Bezalel. So what I can say from the first Midrash is, Bezalel just got the job through genetics. What I can say in the second Midrash is, God must have seen that he did something. Or else he would have taken him out of the job. So the first Midrash suggests that it's just genes, but the second Midrash is leading us in a direction that maybe there's more to the story. Can I pass you a mic? Oh, wait, sorry. She had a question. Oh, and then we'll go. Please.
Yeah, so I say this, start many times with this phrase. I have a problem with this. So what you're saying is that God looked ahead and could see what was going to happen, and so then God went ahead and said, I'm going to move forward with this because I can see what's going to happen. So you know where I'm going with this. Okay. So if God looks ahead, which I don't go with this at all, but
Yeah.
if God looks ahead with, like you said, and see what's going to happen, and you look at what this world is and what's happened, this doesn't follow for me that then God would say, oh, okay, I'm going to go ahead with this because this is fine. It doesn't work, really, for me.
Well, what did he see? What did he see?
Death, destruction.
No. Look specifically at what God saw. God looked and saw Israel accepting the Torah. So that was a long time ago, right? It was 3,500 years ago. We accepted the Torah. Look at us now. We're still doing it. We're still studying. The Jewish people have held on to the Torah. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, but there's all this other awful stuff.
Well,
I mean, if you saw all this stuff going on, why? You said he created the world. How about everything else? I mean, that's
Well-
very narrow focus there.
But those problems, well, yes, it is. It is. And I don't have answers for such, existential questions. But except to say, first of all, the problems of the world and how horrible the situation is not because of God, it's because of people. Right? People can do whatever, we can do whatever we want. We want to treat each other with respect, we can. If we don't want to, we get what we got. But if you compare the Torah to other faith traditions, the way that the Torah reaches out to the stranger and to the non-Jew, it's the most oft-repeated mitzvah, is how to treat the stranger. If you look in other faith traditions, a couple in particular, how to treat the stranger is sometimes with the sword, sometimes worse, So the Torah is trying. I don't know that we're listening, but it's trying. So, but if you don't believe that, I would read the Maharal of Prague, who has a really good defense of it. So I can get you that too.
No microphone.
Yeah.
Looking at the second midrash, is this the first reference to the resurrection of the dead? Because it doesn't say what precipitates it.
Oh,
It doesn't talk about the coming of the Messiah. And I think that it's the first I can remember.
yeah. No, it's not the first resurrection. It's not the first mention because this is from the rabbis in the midrash, and you have all the way back into the prophets already. So even into the Tanakh, later in the books of prophets, Ezekiel, for example.
I knew that.
Yeah. So that's way, way earlier than this. So,
Oh, that's true.
yeah, I mean, you're talking 1,000 years earlier. So if you're going back to the prophets. So no, these ideas exist in the Bible, and they're hinted at in the Torah, but they're explicitly mentioned in Ezekiel. And then this is now...
But Ezekiel talks about the coming of the Messiah.
Yeah, and the resurrection of the
No,
bones. Right. So no, you already have it. And it's hinted at in the Torah as well. Okay, these are good questions. They're just... each of these questions is its own course. So I don't know that I can do it justice in just a few minutes. But what I can do justice to is Midrash number 3. Let's see, who's got a mic? Ed, do you have a mic? Pass. So Shemot Rabbah 43, the third source on the first side. Alternatively.
Alternatively, see, I have called the name of Bezalel.
By the way, what does alternatively mean?
Means there's another midrash you're disagreeing with.
It means we're not really satisfied with what we have so far. And usually the way it's written is davar acher, which means another word. But when it says that, it generally means there's more to the story. We're not quite satisfied with what we have so far. Okay, that's how the rabbis mean that. Okay.
See, I have called the name of Betzalel. This is Kohelet 6:10. That which exists was already named. God declared, the one I set from the start to create the Mishkan, I have already named him. What is, and it is known that he is man. While Adam was yet a golem, God showed him each righteous person who would arise from him. Some hung from Adam's head, some from his hair, some from his forehead, some from his eyes, some from his nose, some from his mouth, some from his ear, some from his earlobe.
Okay. So golem, you probably know what a golem is from Prague. But what a golem really just means is a lump of clay. And so what this is saying is that when God the only perfect physical specimen ever created was Adam. Not so much Eve, because Eve came out of Adam. I mean, you could argue Eve, I guess, too, but Adam was actually made by God out of whatever God wanted to make it. And Eve was made out of Adam. So Adam now, once he's made, is already human, so he can't be perfect. So, but whatever, it doesn't matter. But you could say Adam and Eve, they didn't have parents, right? They were made, they weren't born. And so when God made Adam, he made him in a way that every Jew who would ever live would somehow descend from some part of Adam. We each some of us come from his eyes, some of us come from his nose, some of us come from his ears, some of us come from his forehead, and each of them means different things. So, your talent or your interests or whatever are sort of built into who you are. Whether you're right-brained or left-brained, artistic, mathematic, whatever you are. And so that's how it was. So one of the things then we can say is, when it says in the Torah, see, I have called the name of Betzalel, and God said to Moses, so it says, while Adam was yet a golem, God showed him each righteous person who would arise from him. And so there was something about Betzalel, and this is kind of the same vein as the second midrash, but there was something that he was going to do. There was something about him that God already knew and was showing to Moses, which means to say that he was going to do something, but it was predestined, which I know drives you crazy. Because we love free will, right?
Yeah, I was going to, I was going to point out from
If you don't use the mic, then the people at home can't hear you, and then I get emails.
It's on. Okay. So, what I want to point out is that I think this is all about free choice and free will and predestination, and that whole discussion. In the beginning, he saw when God sees Israel accepting the Torah, that Israel has the free will and chooses Torah, but the other instances are not free will. They're genetics, they're predetermination. And I think it's this cyclical or circular argument about is it free will or is it predetermination?
Right, that's what we're getting at, 100%. Behind you? Good point. And we're going to build on that a little bit.
I just had a question regarding the golem. Is that something from Kabbalah? What exactly is a golem?
So a golem's just a lump of clay, but later on it was used by the Maharal of Prague as to build something to give the Jews hope, something to protect them from the anti-Semites. I just started reading one of the Maharal of Prague's books, so I happen to be very into that right now.
Also, wasn't it the Hobbit, the little golem that you call?
Mike, I'd hate for anyone to have missed that at home. No, I'm just kidding. What? Did you have another question? Oh, okay, behind you. Behind you. There you go.
So I'm a little conflicted by what you said, that every person has a piece of Adam. But this says every righteous person. So if you weren't righteous, would you necessarily have a part of Adam?
No, you would, but God wouldn't have showed it to Moses. God only showed to Moses the people who actualized what they were, the potential that they were given.
Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, in his book, one of his books, points out a slightly different spin on this Torah portion. He points out the difference between Bezalel and Moses.
Between
Moses,
who? Oh, Bezalel, okay.
Bezalel. He points out that Moses is the giver or the conduit of the law. Bezalel is the conduit of particularity, practicality. He builds the Mishkan. He's got to know how to put the boards together, how to put a roof on, how to weave the linen. So these are the two anchors of Judaism, the law and the particularity.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. I like that. Okay, well, so I don't have much time left, so I want to try to move through this a little bit. There's a source at the bottom here from the Talmud. I want to look actually two Talmudic sources. The first one is from a tractate in the Babylonian Talmud called Nedarim, which means vows. We don't really have these anymore. You know the word Nedarim because we have, when we get rid of all our vows, on Kol Nidre, right? Kol Nidre, Nedarim, it's the same word. Nedarim is the Hebrew. Okay, so it says, and for what reason is it not common for Torah scholars to give rise to Torah scholars from among their sons? Why are Torah scholars generally born to paupers who are not Torah scholars themselves? Rav Yosef said, this is so they should not say that Torah is their inheritance. Okay, what does that mean?
Torah belongs to them more than anybody else.
Torah belongs to them more than anybody else? What else? What does it mean? Yeah. Ed?
This is a case where actualization matters more than genealogy.
Yes. Right. So you cannot be a Torah scholar based on who your father is or mother. Right? You just can't be. You can only be a Torah scholar if you have the knowledge. And so they would never put you in position. Nobody would ever put a rabbi in position to be the leader of a Jewish community. I mean, traditionally. In a traditional. Today you don't have to know Torah. But in the old days, you had to be a real expert in Torah or they're not going to put you in charge unless you had demonstrated real Torah knowledge, no matter who your father was.
Also, it refers back to Moses in that he was the humblest. And so someone from a humble background that is knowledgeable about Torah and exudes Torah is brought forth as far as being a leader, and their father doesn't have to be wealthy for them to be.
Right. So look, if you automatically became the rabbinic leader because of your father, then Moses' kids would have become the leaders. But they don't. Gershom and Eliezer become nothing. I mean, later on we hear from them, but actually one of them becomes problematic. Now, are there plenty of lines of rabbis? Father, son, of course. But only because the son learned the Torah. If the son would have said, listen, I recognize that we've had 37 generations of our family in this Hasidic dynasty, but I'd rather be a plumber. You know. Okay. So then you're not going to be 38. Now, chances are you would be, because you've been taught from birth that the only thing you need to know is Torah, and you're just learning Torah all day. So there's a chance you would. This isn't saying it's not possible, but what it's saying is, I think it's making the point, it's not enough. You can't just be from the line. Okay, other comments? No? Oh, sometimes, yeah. Okay, next Talmudic section. Who's got a mic? Anyone? All right, Annabelle, would you mind reading? So, Bavli Menachot. This is from again, one last piece of Talmud from the Tractate of Menachot, which talks about different offerings, meal offerings, and so forth.
The sages say to Rabbi Perida, the sage Rabbi Ezra, who is of especially fine lineage, a grandson of Rabbi Avtulus, who in turn is a 10th generation descendant of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who is 10th generation descendant of Ezra the scribe, is standing and waiting at the gate of the house and seeks entry. Rabbi Perida said to the sages, "What is the need for all this detail about Rabbi Ezra's lineage?" Rabbi Perida elaborated, "If he's a man of Torah study, he is worthy of entry on his own account, regardless of his ancestors. And if he's both a man of Torah study and a man of lineage, he's also worthy of entry. But if he's a man of lineage and not a man of Torah, better for fire to devour him than for him to enter my house. In this case, his lineage is to his detriment, as it highlights his failure to become a sage like his ancestors." The sages said to Rabbi Perida, "Rabbi Ezra is a man of Torah study." Rabbi Perida said to them, "If so, let him enter and come."
Okay, and what's the moral of the story? He's not a plumber, right? Nancy? Yeah. Mike? Great with the mic.
So what this is saying is that each person is accounted for their own deeds, their own study, their own efforts. No person is greater and no person is lesser except by what they themselves have done and how they have lived their life. And therefore it's important that we all be the best that we can be.
Beautiful. Perfect. Beautiful. Okay. When I was applying to rabbinic school, and I was thinking, well, there's JTS, which, I grew up in the conservative movement, so it was the only one I really ever heard of. I never even heard of HUC. Until my professor in college said, "Okay, I can't wait to write your recommendation for HUC." I said, "I want to be a rabbi." He said, "Okay, you'll go to HUC." I said, "Okay, but what's that?" Then I called HUC and they said, "What do you know about Reform Judaism?" I said, "I can play golf on Shabbat." That was, and so they said, "Well, we think here's a book you should read and learn about it." This was in the fall of my senior year of college. They said, "Maybe you should apply in the spring. I'm not sure you're ready," so I had to read a book. So I read the book and then I called them back. I still have 6 minutes. When I knew that if I applied to JTS, probably my grandfather's name alone would have got me a long way, because he was a pretty well-known conservative rabbi, and he was very involved with JTS. And at HUC, I didn't really know anybody. So my grandmother was friends with Alexander Schindler, Alav Shalom. And and she was very good friends with him. And my great-grandfather was Rabbi Schindler's thesis advisor at City College of New York, and they were very close. In fact, Rabbi Schindler did my great-grandfather's funeral. Rabbi Schindler was the president of the Reform movement for 30-some years. And so my parents were nervous that I wouldn't get into HUC. So they said to because they knew someone from our town who didn't get in, and she was smart. And I had no background in the Reform movement. So they asked my grandmother to call Rabbi Schindler and say, "Would you put in a good word for my grandson at HUC?" And he said, "No." He said, "I don't know him. I'm not involved with the college." Yeah, right. So what he said was, "You can call my daughter. She's more involved." And I said to my parents, we're not calling his daughter. We don't even know him, let alone, we're not. Who would have thought that 6 years after that, I'd be working with his daughter in North Carolina, in Charlotte, and she would be the senior rabbi of the synagogue that I'd be working at. And I didn't even realize that my great-grandfather was her father's thesis advisor until one day I walked into her office, and for whatever reason, she had her father's thesis sitting on her desk, or on her table in her office, and I was looking at it, and I opened it, and I saw that, proctored by, and there was my great-grandfather's name. I knew they were friends, but I didn't know that part of it. So I get into my interview at Hebrew Union College, and the head of the dean of admissions, who also became one of my professors. Some of you met him in Charleston. He was the rabbi who came with us in Charleston to lead our tour, Gary Zola. He knows everything about every Jewish person who's ever lived in America. And my great-grandfather, not the one who was a rabbi, but the one who was a professor, was a Jewish sociological professor at City College, and Brandeis, the one who was Schindler's teacher, and he was pretty famous in the 30s and 40s and 50s as a Jewish professor. To me, he was my great-grandfather who died, the year I graduated high school. He was born in 1900 in Poland. He died in 1993. And, he was just my great-grandfather who was just really old. I wasn't aware of his scholarship until I went to rabbinic school and started reading his books. But the head of the dean of admissions, who's also now he's a history professor, he knew my great-grandfather. And he knew about his whole career, and he knew about a couple of the landmark books that he wrote. And so when I walked into the interview and I sat down, the first thing they said was, "This is Oscar Janowski's great-grandson." I was like, "Who?" And you could see the professor saying, and already I had a leg up. Now, if I would have said something like, "I don't know why the hell I'm here. I actually wanted to be a plumber, but my parents made me," then I wouldn't have gotten in. But already, because of that, I had a leg up. It was clear. It was. By the way, in addition to applying to rabbinic school, there was a moment in time where I thought maybe I want to be a Jewish studies professor and not a rabbi. And so I applied to 2 master's PhD programs out of college. And I applied to the 2 best ones, Brandeis and Harvard. I didn't get into Harvard. I got into Brandeis. Why did I get into Brandeis? Because my great-grandfather used to be part of that program when he taught there, because I didn't do very well in that stupid GRE test. I could never do math. But don't tell me the world doesn't work a little bit like that. Right? It does. Now, the Midrash, though, has a problem with that. And so the Midrash builds up Midrash 1, Midrash 2, Midrash 3, but then it comes and concludes with Midrash 4. So the way it concludes is Shemot Rabbah 44. So if you look at the last one, who's got a mic? Anybody have a mic that could read? Annabelle, or whatever, anybody? Would you mind reading the last one alternatively?
Alternatively, see, I have called the name. This is one of 7 people who were called multiple names. Some were called 4, Eliyahu. Bezalel was called 6.
Okay, so what we're saying is, in Exodus it says, "See, I have called the name," which the Midrash is saying, let me just tell you, this is code for Bezalel had a few different names. A lot of people did. I told you about the name of, Abraham had a lot of names, and the Midrash brings the names. Did I tell you the story about how I named my son? So when my son Ethan was born, we wanted to name him after my grandfather, Abraham, who was the rabbi in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, conservative rabbi. And so we wanted to name him after him, but we thought, Abraham's not the coolest name these days. It's just, So we named his Hebrew name Avraham. And my daughter's name started with an E. We picked another, typical Jewish name that starts with E, Ethan. So I'm telling this to a story one day to a friend of mine who was Orthodox, who knew his Midrash pretty well. And I said, yeah, we named his Hebrew name, but we didn't name his English name after him, but his Hebrew name is Avraham. And he looked at me like he thought I was joking. What's so funny? He's like, don't you know what Eitan is? I said, yeah, it's a name. It means strong. He said, no. In the Midrash, it's one of Abraham's nicknames. I didn't know that. So we did name him Abraham. We just called it Ethan. And I looked up in the Midrash, and there it was, one of Abraham's nicknames, according to the Midrash. He was known as Eitan, which is strength. So I thought it was pretty incredible. But Bezalel had 6 names, according to the Midrash. And here they are. Okay. Annabella, please.
Bezalel was his nation called him, and God called him 5 names of affection for the Mishkan, Re'ayah, for God showed him to Moshe and all Israel, and said, from the beginning I established him to create the Mishkan. And Shoval.
Okay, so let's just point out, Bezalel was what the nation called him, meaning that was the name that he was given at birth. That's how they knew him, which means he didn't do anything to earn it. That's just the name that he got. And then God called him Ra'ayah, for God showed, Ra'ayah means he showed him to him. And the verse in the Torah says, Ra'eh, see, I have given you, right? So it's a play on words from the Torah. But the first two names that Bezalel gets are names that are just given to him that he doesn't earn. The first one he was given at birth. The second one is because God showed him to Moses. But the first 2 names he gets, he hasn't done anything to earn them. How many are left? Right, if you can do that kind of math in your head. There's 4 left. So now let's look how he gets the next 4 names. Okay?
From the beginning, I established him to create the Mishkan, and Shoval, for he made a nest for God.
Okay, so Shoval is because he did something himself. Okay? Next one.
Yachat, for he placed God's awe among Israel.
So if you're keeping score at home, it's 2-2. 2 names that he got for doing nothing, and 2 names that he earned because he did something. It's 2-2. Guess who's going to win? All right, let's keep going.
Achumai, for he bonded Israel with God like brothers to God.
Okay, so 3-2. He's earned it, and 2 were just given to him. And the last one?
Or, because he placed God's awe among Israel.
Okay, so, one more. We don't really count Bezalel here. It's the other ones. Lachad.
Lachad, because he placed glory and beauty upon Israel.
Okay, so besides Bezalel, there are more names that he's called because of things that he does and he earns than names that he was just given because of his lineage or for whatever reason. Okay, let's finish it up.
So again, Lahad, because he placed glory and beauty upon Israel, for the Mishkan was their beauty.
Right, and all of these are plays on Hebrew words that are inferred from the Torah or the Tanakh. Okay.
Rabbi Hanina ben Pazi said, there is none greater than the tribe of Yehuda and none lowlier than the tribe of Dan, which came from the maids. God said, let him be matched with Bezalel, so that they will not mock him, and so that no one will be arrogant, for the great and small are equal before God. The Mishkan was made by these 2 tribes, and so too the Bet HaMikdash, Shlomo, was from Yehuda, and Hiram was the son of a widow from Naphtali.
Right, so what we saw here is Bezalel is joined with Aholiab, who comes from a weaker tribe, the weakest. And later on, when King Solomon, we looked at this text last week, when King Solomon goes to build the holy temple, he finds a guy named Hiram, not the same Hiram who was the king of Tyre, but a different Hiram who was from the combined tribes of Naphtali and Gad, and he says, I, Solomon, am from Judah, I'm going to bring someone from Dan who's going to be in charge of building the first temple. And so what we see here is, if for whatever reason you've been fortunate in life, if for whatever reason you have resources, or if for whatever reason you have Torah knowledge, then you have a responsibility. And that responsibility is to find the people who don't have Torah knowledge or don't have resources and make it permissible, make it possible for them to also share in the same Torah that you already have. That's your responsibility if you have Torah and or resources. And if you don't have Torah and resources, you can acquire them. And the way to acquire them is to find Torah. This is who Hillel was. Remember the story of Hillel? Hillel would sit on the top of the yeshiva and they wouldn't let him in. And he was sitting out in the cold and he was freezing and he would look in through the window down below. Finally, they found him and they brought him in. They realized he knew more Torah than any of the people who were sitting there, but he was really poor and so forth. But there's one more idea that I just want to conclude with. And I often say this at funerals. That you can, and this is in the Talmud, you can be accepted into heaven based on who your children are. But you can't be accepted, let me say it again. You can be accepted into heaven based on the merits of your kids. But you can't be accepted into heaven based on the merits of your parents. So it's not so much what you receive, it's what you give. Okay. All right. Shabbat shalom. About the blue, the tailor. It doesn't exist anymore. You can't find it. What's that? Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore. So, and there's certain rabbis over time who they think they found it. They became the tailor rabbi. Forget who it is. Yeah, but I'm sure there's something. I have to do some research on it. I don't have a good answer for it. I'm sure it has to do with the value, how hard it is to find. preacher should be able to make any portion exciting. But some weeks it's more of a challenge, you can tell, than others. That was a tough one, very tough. So. Ah, very nice. Yafeh, yafeh. You mean Mishkan HaMishkan? Oh, Rashi